You know, I don't know if it's good news or not, but I don't see it in here, and this is pretty all-encompassing. So the fact that it's not in here, I'd have to say that it's not a legitimate piece. Now, that's not to say it wouldn't have any value.
This is a very cool book. This book would survive, and I really like it.
Graded on condition differently.
A book in the original boards, that is exceptional by itself. They're going to want this, and they're going to want it bad because you don't see copies.
Guess what this seller intends to sell at the pawn shop? A Claude Monet painting. This isn't something you see every day. The seller, Ken, isn't particularly fond of artwork, so he's looking to sell it. Of course, Rick is captivated by this painting.
Made by Tiffany & Company, would be worth tens of thousands of dollars. But these things are often faked.
But I have a letter from Tiffany that says that they're real.
Oh, you do?
Incredible, but it's quite unfortunate that this seller is clueless about this painting's value. Trust Rick to step in and share his expertise. He gives a biography of Monet, highlighting how his iconic works sparked the art movements.
When these belt buckles first came out around the country, someone basically was just driving around the country going from antique store to antique store and apparently made a fortune. He got rid of thousands of them.
But have you seen the letter before?
What detailed information? This seller isn't ready to take chances as he presents Rick with documents to prove authenticity. Who would have thought this painting was insured for a staggering $21 million? That's huge.
You know, I know she did a lot of USO performances over in Korea, and she was kind of known for responding to letters herself. And Marilyn probably connected with normal people because she came from a pretty humble background.
What's the next step? Before Rick can make any move, he needs to bring in a specialist to take a look. Now that the specialist is here, he dives into Claude Monet's amazing works and legacies.
It's a good thing she was known for her acting and not her poetry.
I like to think of this as the lost Marilyn poem because there's no obvious documentation.
Cool stories, right? The expert decides to scrutinize the document the seller claims will verify the painting's authenticity. It's almost unbelievable that a Monet painting is sitting on a counter in Las Vegas. The expert meticulously assesses up close.
Tell you what, mind if I have a buddy of mine come take a look at it? He works for PSA. They're one of the most reputable signature people there is out there.
Wonderful.
I'll be right back.
Thank you very much.
Having no paperwork is a massive red flag.
It's really quite a tricky piece. How will the expert determine the authenticity? Considering the painting's immense value, there is no room for error here. Oh boy, the expert might need a second opinion on this.
See how her M moves so flowing right into her signature. That's usually how she always signed her name. Now, something that's striking about this photo, the secretary used to sign a lot of her correspondence, used to like to use a red pen.
The plot thickens. Now that the second expert is here, we might understand what we are dealing with. He goes in to see if he can find anything that says it is 150 years old.
And it could have been her sentiment. She might have shared that sentiment with someone that was writing for her, but she did not write that.
Does it have any value?
The thing that actually would probably have more value is probably the photo postcard. The poem, unfortunately, because you really...
It's time for the final judgment. You could literally feel the tension building up. Is it a real Monet painting or not? Let's see.
It's disappointing, but I very much appreciate your time.
Have a nice day, man.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care.
Thank you.
Too bad this isn't the real deal. It could have made the shop a lot of money. On the plus side, maybe in real life, she was a much better poet.
What do we got here?
An ivory tusk.
A guy comes into the shop with a painting. I wonder what sort of painting this is. I'm curious to learn about the artist and the item's worth, and there's no one better to assess it than Rick himself.
I mean, because you don't even have the forgery.
Right.
This is a copy of a copy?
That's a copy of a forgery.
It's not even the real forgery.
Thanks for bringing
Thank
it in,
you.
man.
Appreciate it. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make...
Cool. The artist turns out to be quite popular. Rick gives more details about him, and he could literally go on and on with his story. Unfortunately, there is no paperwork to authenticate this piece.
Your line into the water, and you had 12 feet of clearance. You marked the Twain.
Oh.
Mark Twain.
Okay.
Which meant clear to go.
Okay.
Mark Twain was one of the greatest authors in the world.
How then will they go about this? However, Rick wants someone to glance at this painting to check if Prince indeed painted it. There is no way Rick would pay $50,000 without knowing if it's the real deal. Without further ado, let's hear what the expert has to say.
Mark Twain was not Mark Twain. He was Samuel Clemens.
Yes.
This is supposedly a stock certificate where the shares are worth $100 a piece, and he has 100 shares. Would you put that stock certificate?
Interesting. Here we go again with tales about this pop star artist. Now, down to business. Could this painting really be a collectible? What's more, did Prince really paint this?
A lot of these. I wish it was real. I mean, he's one of my favorite characters in history.
Okay.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, young lady.
I'm really disappointed the stock certificate was a fake. Now, I guess.
No one knows for sure. It may seem he did this, but is the signature real? How will they strike a deal if there is no way to authenticate this item?
Belt buckles made by Tiffany. I like collecting antiques. It's fun to keep the past alive. I was hoping to get, 500 a piece just so I can get some more money to go buy some more antiques.
So where did you get these?
I got them here in town at a flea market. The guy I bought them from.
Raphael comes in with a statue and has little knowledge about it. It is a Pegasus statue sculpted by Picoult. Let's see how this unfolds.
Not really done anything with it. I don't really know how much it's worth, but with it being Abraham Lincoln, there's a chance that it could be worth a lot of money, and that would be pretty exciting.
So you have a print here of
Yes.
Abraham Lincoln that's
Yep.
autographed at the bottom, A. Lincoln. We have
Nice. Rick talks about the sculpture and his words. Well, it will be highly collectible if it turns out to be authentic. People would go to any length to fake an item. Will this be the case for this item? I don't know. Meanwhile, Rick notices something about this statue.
nomination for ink, okay? After 60, 70, 80 years, those iron filings began to rust.
Okay.
That's why when you look at old documents and things like that, all the letters are no longer black, they're orange.
Okay.
Yikes, what could it possibly be? Here comes the bad news. The seller is furious about Rick's observation, and Raphael believes Rick is just making up stuff.
Copy of the Declaration of Independence.
This is something that was done, I believe, 1920s, 1930s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did a great Abraham Lincoln signature, okay? I mean, it was,
He continues to rage. How will they both handle this? Let's find out.
It worth anything?
believe it or not, the forgeries by Cozy are worth a little bit of money because it was by a famous forger. But
This customer meets Rick and Chumley at the pawn shop with what he believes to be an etching. However, Rick disagrees with him, claiming it's more of an Abraham Lincoln print. This seller hopes to make a huge amount of money from the item, but Rick will be the judge of that.
so you have a print here of
Yes.
Abraham Lincoln that's
Yep.
autographed at the bottom, A. Lincoln. We have oxidation around the edges of the paper here, so you can tell that it's pretty old. Lincoln died in 1865.
Let's move on. It's quite an interesting piece anyway. Rick further educates us on the details of this particular print. However, Rick is worried it might be a forgery.
Joseph Cossey was one of the most famous forgers in American history. Cossey faked everyone, from Benjamin Franklin to George Washington, and sold them to big-time collectors. He even forged a copy of the Declaration of Independence.
Oops. He closely examines it and notices that the way the name Abraham Lincoln is written on it seems unusual. The customer's only concern is whether he can get rid of it.
It worth anything?
Believe it or not, the forgeries by Cozy are worth a little bit of money
Really?
because it was by a famous forger. But what you have here,
Not so fast. This item might be a copy of a forgery. It turns out that it is not even a real forged work, but a copy. Oh no! What will happen now?
Yeah.
I mean, because you don't even have the forgery.
Right.
This is a copy of a copy?
That's a copy of a forgery.
It's not even the real forger.
Thanks for bringing
Thank
it in,
you.
man.
Appreciate it. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make me an offer, but
Here, Kim walks in with a stock certificate. She hopes to strike a deal so she can finally go on a shopping spree. But we can't be too sure about that, though. Anyway, let's see how it goes.
No.
Okay, he was a riverboat pilot, and you just didn't go down the Mississippi River. You had to navigate down it. And when you dropped your line to the water and you had 12 feet of clearance,
Okay, Rick delves right in with his stories, with the seller and Rick's dad paying close attention. However, Rick has concerns about this item, putting the seller on edge.
was not Mark Twain, he was Samuel Clemens.
Yes.
This is supposedly a stock certificate where the shares are worth $100 a piece, and he has 100 shares. Would you put that stock certificate in your pen name or your real name?
I read that they put it in.
Fingers crossed. Note to all, no one should ever think they can easily fool Rick with a counterfeit. However, I wouldn't blame Kim because she wasn't aware that the item was fake. Such a disappointing turnout.
Anybody could counterfeit it. Just everything about it screams fake. This was probably made in the 1920s, 1930s, and some guy was making a lot of money selling a lot of these. I wish it was real. I mean, he's one of my favorite characters in history.
Up next, a customer arrives at the pawn shop with an item he claims was made by Tyclaim's CO. What could it be exactly, because the famous company was well known for making different things? Anyway, Devin, the seller, bought this item for someone, and he hopes to strike a good deal with the pawn shop owners. First, he shares some background about the item with Rick.
The guy I bought them from a museum in Montana in 1969.
Okay.
And this is the marking of Tiffany on the back. All three have it.
Okay, do you know who these guys are?
Mr. Wells and Mr. Fargo.
That's correct.
Interesting? Rick is pumped up about this particular item. He goes on to enlighten us about the buckle belt and points out that if it was authenticated, this item could go for a huge amount of money.
A genuine Wells Fargo and Company belt buckle from Nevada from this time period, made by Tiffany and Company, would be worth tens of thousands of dollars. These things are often faked.
But I have a letter.
Whoa, that's incredible. To make it more interesting, this seller is more than prepared. He shows Rick a document, which he claims will prove the genuineness of the buckle belt, but Rick remains unconvinced.
Let me just show you something right here. Tiffany would never make a belt buckle, then solder the little latch over their logo. Anything associated with Tiffany was done perfectly. This is not perfectly,
Rick is not certain if Tiffany truly made this particular item. The more Rick talks about the possibility of it being fake, the more disappointed the seller gets. How will it go for this pair?
The story goes, when these belt buckles first came out around the country, someone basically was just driving around the country going from antique store to antique store and apparently made a fortune. He got rid of thousands of them.
But have you seen the letter before?
Mitchell brings a huge painting to the pawn shop. He has had the painting in his possession for 12 years. It appears somewhat to be a Salvador Dali painting. This customer is eager to close a big deal. Well, what do Rick and the old man think?
He came up with the whole melting clocks and they were really, really popular.
Dollies, you can't take them all in at one time. You have to go through it piece by piece to learn what's in there.
I'm eager to hear their opinion, but Rick, ever the skeptic, has doubts about this piece. It is a good call that he wants to bring in an expert. As much as Rick is tempted, he is concerned about the authenticity.
So if this thing is legit, of course I want it. But any artist who's really popular with collectors is really popular with forgers. So you always have to be careful.
Salvador Dali, excellent. Not only was he a surrealist in his artwork, he was...
I would be bothered too. Rick has some concerns. The glitter on the painting just doesn't sit right with him because he hasn't seen a Salvador Dali painting like that. I hope the expert proves his thoughts wrong. We can't tell yet.
I have heard that he has embellished with glitter in the past, so it's a possibility. Typically, I'd like to look at the annual price guide of his work, and that basically has everything. So if you don't mind, let me consult that for a few minutes and see if I can find that image.
The expert is closely examining this piece. He has a copy of Salvador's works. Hopefully, he finds this painting in his book. The stakes couldn't be higher. He can't find it. Could this be a fake?
News or not, but I don't see it in here, and this is pretty all-encompassing. So the fact that it's not in here, I'd have to say that it's not a legitimate piece. Now, that's not to say it wouldn't have any value, because there is a chance that the signature is authentic.
Yikes. At least there is a bit of hope as he checks the signatures further. I hope they are real. The seller could go home with something. How does it go from here? I'm curious to find out.
No, I'm afraid not. He signed a lot, and there's still, even though he's passed, there's still a lot of his signatures floating around out there.
So what are we talking?
Assuming the signature is authentic, I'd put a value on it somewhere around $600, $700, $800.
Meanwhile, Rick gets a call from someone claiming to have an original piece of etching. Rick is curious to know what this gentleman has in store for him. To be safe, he goes down to the place with an expert to check it out.
So I've called up Chad, and we're waiting on the guy. Hey, how's it going?
Fine, thank you. How are you today?
Just put these up here.
Got them at a sheriff's auction, Gove County, Kansas.
Sheriff just had some iCards.
They just happen to be there.
What could it be? Harold hopes to get $1,700 for this piece. Meanwhile, Rick gets into character and tells us more about this art etching. Even the expert has something to say.
18 years old, working in a fashion house as a model. She turned into the muse for almost the rest of his life, of his work. So anytime you see a blonde-haired, curly girl in an iCard, you know it's Fanny.
What next? He continues with the stories, but I don't think there is time for that. Rick just wants to know if it's genuine or not.
Okay, if these are real etchings, they'll be worth a lot of money. An etching is a copper plate that has an engraving into it, and a really big giant press presses that into the paper, so you will see an indentation line all the way around it.
Okay, the expert goes in to examine the piece, but unfortunately comes bearing bad news. Oh boy, this isn't what the seller or Rick even expected. That was a close call for Rick, but will they get to strike a deal? Keep watching to find out.
They're stamped and printed.
These are not etchings.
No, they're not. So that obviously is quite detrimental to the value.
How much did you want for these?
I like his $1,700 for the pair.
Great! Another etching is in view. Henry approaches Chum with a Joan Miro etching. Fortunately, Chum is a fan of Miro's work, so he has some background on it. Anyway, how much does Henry want for this?
If I sell the Moreau today, I'll take my wife on a belated honeymoon, and I'll probably spend the rest of the money on the house.
Do you know a date on it or anything like that?
No idea. I don't know the title, the date. All I know is it's titled 49 out of 50, so I assume it's an edition of 50.
Is the price what Chum would agree with? But before then, why don't we hear what Chum has to say? I'm quite impressed with how he does justice in explaining the important information of Miro's work. But $12,000 for this?
There's definitely a big market for Moreau's work. In 2012, Sotheby's set a record by selling his masterpiece, Etoile Blue, for $37 million. If this piece is real, it won't fetch millions, but it could be worth thousands. So how much do you want to get for it?
What's Chum's take? He is worried that it might be a fake because he isn't familiar with this particular piece's signature. So he decides to bring a professional to check it out. Will the expert be able to identify this signature? Let's find out.
Miro on the floor. Very, very nice. Yeah, Moreau, I mean, one of the most important artists of the 20th century. I mean, he lived to be 90, and he lived through just about every major.
Okay, the expert is here, and he goes on to give us all the tea about this popular artist. The seller wants to take a closer look.
You can see that this is a figure. You can see the eye. You can see the appendages here, and it's probably a woman of the night wearing an ornate gown with beautiful flowing colors.
Now the atmosphere is tense. He needs to determine whether it is authentic. Fortunately, there is good news. Henry is happy to hear that.
An original Moreau graphic.
Oh, excellent. Great.
Okay, now this is where I run into some issues. I have seen this work, and every single one that I've seen...
Not so fast. There seems to be an issue. At this point, things aren't going as expected for Henry. Anyway, the expert advises Chum to overlook this minor issue. But will Chum take his advice?
That somebody else signed and numbered. Which is a shame, because even an original graphic that's unsigned and unnumbered is going to be worth many thousands of dollars. It's kind of like autographing a Mickey Mantle.
Carrie approaches Chum at the store with a John Lennon artwork, hoping to make some money out of it. And out of nowhere, Chum struck again with his jokes.
I just want to check this out one more time. You might want to get some gloves if you're going to handle that.
Good employees are hard to find.
My birthday's tomorrow. Be a great birthday present.
It's definitely cool, man.
Classic Chum. We already know Rick will give us some schooling. This artwork looks more like doodles, which is pretty cool. Carrie wants to sell it for $20,000.
$20,000.
$20,000.
That's a known 9-panel self-portrait that he did, and so.
Okay. He did a lot of art. There's a lot of his stuff out there. You have a little problem with this one, though.
Unfortunately, Rick revealed some unexpected information about this item. Will Carrie make any money from it? Stay tuned.
It's 100% fake.
Glad I didn't pay much for it.
How much you pay for it?
$10.
You know what? You never know. If the next 50 of these pay $10 a piece for every one of them, maybe one of them will be real. Okay.
It looks like Corey is the one in charge here. He attends to a seller, Jason, who wants to sell a signed Marilyn Monroe picture and a poem. Jason is pretty confident that he is going to go home with a chunk of money.
To the Las Vegas Museum of Fine Arts.
Okay.
This was the insurance policy for that painting at that time. And it was insured at that time at $2.1 million.
Let's see how it goes. Corey gives us the scoop on Marilyn, known for her acting skills. It's kind of out of the blue that she would have written a poem. What do we know? If it's legit, it's a golden opportunity for a deal.
I think we can both make money off it.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. I'll be right back.
Thanks. If they bring some people in, it only helps the situation. I'm hoping to walk out with $1 million.
Oh my gosh, this is the Monet.
This is it.
All right.
What else? The poem was written to a man. Jason reveals that he has already had 4 experts check it out. Could it be an exaggeration? Is Corey convinced already? Corey went ahead and inquired about the appraisal they gave for the item.
Yeah. He started painting very early, so what's early period? It doesn't really tell you a whole lot. But he was a perfectionist, and a lot of his lesser pieces have kind of been lost to time. So this may have been a piece that he did, perhaps as a study to another piece.
We are eager to know. Corey can't trust his words, so he brings in an expert to be certain. With his evaluation, collectors would be after this item.
Have every color of the rainbow. I mean, you've got purples, you've got orange, you've got reds, you've got greens, and there's very little of that. That having been said, I don't want to dismiss it. it? Because again, you're talking about a piece that, if it's authentic, this could be a $5 million piece.
Cool, but first we have to authenticate the signature on this item. We have to know if it's real or fake. Oh boy, it looks like another person signed this.
I go to in our gallery when we have masterpieces come through just to verify authenticity and things like that. I trust his opinion implicitly, so.
Okay.
I'm a fine art expert specialized in authentication of important masters.
Damn, but we aren't done here. There could be a ray of hope if the poem was revealed to have been written by Marilyn Monroe. Sadly, it was not a good day for Jason.
So we should at least see cracks in the painting. Yeah. Also here in the signature, there is absolutely not one crack. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yikes. What is Corey's take after all this revelation? Let's keep watching to see what happens next.
The canvas, all indication of who it could be. You will have all the oil paint sweating through the canvas. Here you don't see that.
This lady walks in with a huge elephant tusk. She claims it's an ivory tusk, and she knows the deal she could make out of this. A sad review is not what we were expecting, but Rick has to do his job.
What do you mean it's not ivory?
This is bone. It's pieced together bone, and it's made for the tourist trade. It only took like 2 seconds to tell this wasn't ivory. I've seen this hundreds of times before. They were in Asia, they went to a market, they were told they were ivory.
Oops! Imagine Rick tells her that the statue isn't what she thinks. It is a tough hill to swallow, especially after she paid a lot of money for this particular item. The seller isn't happy.
Oh my goodness.
As a matter of fact, through the split right here, you can see the wood that's underneath it. When you go overseas, there's a lot of unscrupulous dealers who will tell you it's ivory when it's not. I'm not really interested in buying ivory anymore. I mean, ivory used to be needed for...
Oh boy, Rick wants to offer $100 for this. That is so poor compared to what the seller hoped. I wouldn't blame Rick because he wouldn't want to pay so much for an item that is not that valuable.
Okay, that's what I can do.
Do a little bit better.
There's no way I could do better. It's not real, it's bone, okay?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, but I don't loan on pretty. I loan on what I can sell it.
Joni comes to the shop with an item she hopes to sell. She comes bearing J. Honus Wagner's autograph, but she isn't aware of who the person is. Corey offers to help out with some enlightening stories.
One of the best baseball players of the dead ball era. They called him the Flying Dutchman because he was German. I don't get it.
Okay. I'm hoping like a couple thousand.
So, Honus Wagner, he was the best in the era where baseball...
Interesting. He provides more insights about this renowned baseball player. Chum also chimes in some additional facts. Corey believes that he might be onto a holy grail.
So it's kind of like the holy grail of baseball cards. Do you mind if I check it out a little bit?
No, absolutely.
Okay. It's weird the way it was broken apart, but...
Right.
Then again, maybe that's why it was donated.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with it?
That's amazing, but he needs to authenticate the signature to know if it is real, and he needs expert help to do so. Now that the expert is here, we are in for more stories.
I wish it was a card.
Unfortunately, I mean, the card you talk about, the T206 Honus Wagner, I mean, it's the greatest baseball card of all time. If it wasn't for that card, I mean, you really wouldn't know a thing about it.
Great. It's time for the ultimate truth. The expert wants to examine the signature, and Joni is keen to know whether it is real.
Examples. Pretty intricate, nice signature,
Right.
Pretty basic. Now, what I see here is something with some severe baseline issues. Kind of just jumps all over the place to me. It doesn't have a real good flow to it, and doesn't have a real good style to it. Not taking a look at think.
Even I am curious. The outcome isn't what the seller expected it to be. How will this duo tackle this situation then?
At least it didn't cost you a bunch of money, right?
No, it didn't, and I really appreciate your time. It's great to meet you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Really sad, but then again, I'm pretty happy that I didn't put any money out for it. I'll just take it home and